They vanished from the world, not by force, but by a quiet, unwavering devotion. For decades, the village of Paulinenhof in rural Germany existed in a strange, almost anachronistic bubble. Outsiders saw neat farms, industrious workers, and a deep-seated piety. But beneath the surface, something far more complex, and some would argue sinister, was at play. This wasn't just a religious community, it was a world unto itself, governed by rules most of us would find unthinkable. The story of Paulinenhof is intertwined with the history of the Plymouth Brethren, a Protestant movement that emerged in the 19th century. While many Brethren communities are mainstream and open, certain factions, particularly the exclusive Brethren, took a radical turn. They embraced a strict separation from the world, believing it to be inherently corrupt and unholy. Paulinenhof became one such enclave. Its origins are somewhat shrouded, but by the mid-20th century, it was firmly established as an exclusive Brethren stronghold. Here, the dictates of separation weren't just spiritual guidelines. They were the bedrock of daily life, dictating everything from clothing to communication. Children born into Paulinenhof knew no other existence. Their schooling was internal, designed to reinforce community values and insulate them from external ideas. Television, radio, and later, the internet, were forbidden. The outside world was a dangerous, tempting place, its influences actively purged. The community thrived on self-sufficiency. They ran businesses, farms, workshops, and even small factories, all within the strictures of their faith. Money was earned, but its purpose was to sustain the community, not to bridge the gap to the unclean outside. But this self-sufficiency came at a price. Individual autonomy was practically non-existent. Marriages were arranged, often across different exclusive Brethren communities to maintain genetic purity and ideological alignment. Personal choices were subservient to the collective will, interpreted through the elders. The true architect of Paulinenhof's isolation, and indeed many exclusive Brethren communities globally, was often a charismatic, authoritarian leader. While specific names are difficult to confirm without direct access to internal records, the pattern across these groups points to powerful figures dictating doctrine and daily life. These leaders wielded immense spiritual and practical power. Their pronouncements were considered divine decree beyond question. Dissent was not tolerated. It was seen as a challenge to God himself, carrying the gravest spiritual consequences. For those who dared to question, or even just long for a different life, the consequences were severe. Shunning or disfellowshipping meant complete and utter severance from family, friends, and the only world they had ever known. It was a social death, a psychological amputation. Survivors who have since escaped exclusive Brethren groups often speak of the profound trauma of this isolation. They describe a deep psychological conditioning, making the outside world seem terrifying and impossible to navigate. The fear of eternal damnation was a constant, powerful deterrent. Paulinenhof, like many exclusive Brethren enclaves, maintained its secrecy through a rigid control of information and a deep distrust of outsiders. Journalists, researchers, and even concerned relatives found their inquiries met with silence or carefully constructed deflections. The community operated on a need-to-know basis. Even within, information was compartmentalized. This made it incredibly difficult for anyone to form a complete picture of the group's inner workings, or to challenge its authority effectively. Over time, however, the absolute control began to crack. The digital age, despite stringent prohibitions, made total isolation increasingly difficult. Whispers of life beyond Paulinenhof eventually reached some of the younger members, sparking forbidden curiosities. The strictures on education also created an interesting paradox. While formally educated only within the community, many members developed practical skills and business acumen. These skills, intended to foster self-sufficiency, sometimes became the very tools that could expose them to the outside world. Stories, sometimes fragmented and difficult to verify, began to surface from former members. These accounts painted a picture of a community where strict discipline bordered on abuse, where spiritual purity masked psychological control, and where the promise of salvation came at the cost of personal freedom. These narratives, often shared anonymously, described a life of constant surveillance, where even thoughts were considered subject to spiritual scrutiny. The pressure to conform was immense, creating a pervasive atmosphere of fear and self-censorship. The struggle for those who left was immense. Reintegrating into a society they knew nothing about, often with limited education and no financial resources, presented monumental challenges. They carried the scars of isolation, distrust, and a profound sense of loss. In recent years, the shroud around Paulinenhof and similar exclusive Brethren communities has thinned, though not entirely lifted. Increased public awareness, media scrutiny, and the relentless efforts of former members have forced a degree of engagement with the outside world. It's a complex picture. For those still within, Paulinenhof represents safety, community, and a path to salvation. For those who have left, it is a prison of the mind, a place where their fundamental human rights were curtailed in the name of faith. The story of Paulinenhof serves as a stark reminder of the power of belief and the fine line between devotion and control. It highlights how communities, even in modern Europe, can isolate themselves so completely, shaping entire generations with their unique worldviews. The silent village, once an almost mythical entity, is slowly revealing its secrets. And with each revelation, we gain a deeper, albeit unsettling, understanding of the human need for belonging and the lengths to which some will go to find it or to maintain it. What other hidden communities do you think deserve a closer look?